Adisa, how the hell's it going?
Oh, my health is better. Your boy fell out last week. I had something crazy. Listen, if y'all do jujitsu or not, something crazy is going around all over the Bay. I know it's out where you are. And I even got friends in the UK that got it. One seems like a flu. It was an unnamed virus. That's all they said.
Yeah.
Unnamed virus with bronchitis. The trick is it seems to act like it's going away, and then you get some type of flare up.
Okay.
And so like every week or so, I'm going on week 4. Like midweek, it'll creep up. It might be almost a fever. The head starts banging again. You might feel it, but it's just less than the last time. So guys, if you're feeling stuff like that, don't come into class. Like seriously, like don't stay out because we don't know who's living with old people, who's living with other people that are immunocompromised. But outside of that, I'm great.
Well, I'm on this side of the dirt nap. That's all. That's all a good thing.
Yes, agreed. Thank
So,
you for having me. Thank
uh,
you for having me.
yeah, I thought you were a very obvious choice to talk about something that's interested me for a while, but I haven't really dove into too deeply. I've kind of been involved in the periphery of it, and that's the idea of Stoicism, and in particular, how Stoicism intersects with martial arts. So, can we start with the martial art end of it first? Just give us a quick rundown of your background in hugging men and punching them in the head.
Okay, cool. So the cliff notes of my jujitsu story are this. I was doing Eskrima Serrata in like 1990, 1989, and I was horrible at it. Absolute horrible at it. But I was like, I'm resolved to learning something. I just wanted to learn any martial art. And, Eskrima Serrata was pretty dope. So I was into it. It's a Filipino stick fighting art.
How would you characterize it?
I mean, basically, if you saw Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon when he had that one stick and he started wrecking people, that kind of stuff. It's basically a two stick or a two blade fighting style that mixes really smooth parries and counterattacks. Really smooth stuff. And I really liked it, but I just was not good at it. So one day my friend Jamie LaPena was at his house and he said, "Hey man, I saw this thing. These guys from Brazil are doing all this stuff." And he showed it to me and I was like, "No way, dude, you just get on top of somebody like your old brother and sister family fight thing and that's the end of the fight." I was like, "There's no way that could work." And he was like, "Well, do you think I could take you down if I got there? Do you think you could get out?" I was like, "Absolutely." So of course it doesn't work. And he was like, "Well, I bought some instructionals." So I was doing instructionals pre-UFC and I was able to have really good success with it, wrestling randos who, you know what I mean, thought they were cool.
Who was the first instructional by?
Horian,
Okay.
the early
Oh, so
Horian.
those were like the super polite ones, but also
Yeah,
incredibly expensive for the time.
incredibly expensive, super polite. But my boy also had Gracie in Action 1 and Gracie in Action 2.
Mhm.
So that's where you could see the actual fights, right? Whether it was at the beach or on some crazy indoor place that didn't have mats and people were getting slammed. It was wild. And so I always kind of understood jujitsu to be something that's real, if you're in a real situation. So I believed in it. And I was so small. I have to say I was 160, 165 pounds tops at that time. Fast forward, when Royce Gracie triangle chokes Dan Severn in UFC 4, I always believed in him. I always knew he was going to win. I wasn't worried about it at all. But to see the triangle choke in real time at that point in martial arts was crazy.
Mhm.
And I was like, I have to learn this for real. Like, the tapes were not nearly enough. And so not long after that, Jamie called me. He goes, "Hey man, there's a guy named Ralph Gracie. He's in Mountain View." At the time I lived in San Jose, where I live now. And he said, "So apparently he's got a school in Mountain View. You should go check it out." And I was like, "I'm going to go join." And he was like, "But one thing though." And I was like, "What is it?" He was like, "He's really rough. He's not like Hoist. Like Hoist is supposed to be very nice." And he's like, "It's supposed to be a rough school." I was like, "Whatever." I went and it was a horrifically rough school. I was not fit enough for what happened. And I was so sore that first day
What do
that
you mean by rough?
first of all, the warm-ups, like, people have seen the Kurt Osiander, I think it was the thing that he did with, who's the guy, the food guy? Why am I blanking on his name right? Bourdain, Anthony Bourdain,
Right. So
right? So I'll start from there. So here we
yeah.
go. There's this clip of Anthony Bourdain when he's with Kurt Osiander and he's talking about the Ralph Gracie warm-ups. Man, those warm-ups will break your soul. They weren't It's not like legendary just 'cause, bro, those warm-ups were crazy. And no matter how fit you thought you were, You lifted weights, you didn't lift weights, you jogged a little, you did push-ups, you could bench a lot. Those warm-ups were soul cracking. And I wasn't a fit person. You know what I mean? That's really it. Like I had a real slim baseline for fitness, let alone strength. I was known to be weak. Anybody who knew me growing up, like, "Hey, he's the weak guy." Yeah.
Mhm.
So I remember that first night, I was so sore just from the training. Like they didn't really do me wrong. They didn't beat me up. I don't have one of those kind of stories. But from not using my whole body for real, the way they did, I was sore. I was waking up as I moved in sleep. And I remember looking up at the ceiling and being like, bro, this is painful. I was like, maybe this ain't built for you. And then I said, you know what? Go back one more time. And if it feels this bad, you can quit. But if it doesn't feel this bad, you're going to stay. And it didn't feel as bad. I stayed. I was the worst one in the room every day. Like, I'm not even gonna try and pretend. Like, I remember seeing BJ Penn first day he came into the academy, seeing him roll with Dave Camarillo. You know, he was with Tom Callos, but I didn't
Yeah.
know who Tom was at the time, and I didn't realize that. You know what I mean? I thought he was just BJ's dad. And, so Dave Camarillo, Cameron Earl, BJ Penn, JD Penn. JD Penn was a storm on his own, right? Reagan Penn, like I was getting murdered, bro. But like I didn't care. My whole thing was allow yourself to get murdered so you can learn, right? And because I was a journalist, I got to I started writing about it. So I wrote what I believe is the first jiu-jitsu profile on a Gracie in Maxim magazine. Applegate, Christina
Yeah.
Applegate was on the cover. Christina Applegate was on the cover. I did a thing for half there. Then I got to interview Alio for Rap Pages magazine. I interviewed Alio, Horian, and Hoyce. And Hiron was a green belt at that time, and he was my main translator for me and Alio. And, Alio showed me some moves, and I was already training at House at that time, but, that was crazy.
Do you remember what he
Um,
showed you?
yeah, he showed me wrist grab escapes from standing and just like, standard wrist grab escapes to, when you would squat down, put the person on the floor, whatever. I just taught that last week, you know what I mean? Like literally last week. And, he was 86, but he was very skilled. Like if he wanted to cross choke you, he could cross choke you. You know what I'm saying? Like, was he straight fighting and hitting double legs? No, he was 86, but like he could absolutely teach jujitsu not only coherently, but with very deliberate detail. And so I got lucky, you know what I mean? So around 2001, I left and I started training under Charles Gracie, who had his first academy in Daly City. Daly City was not as intense as House. Like, and Charles didn't mean it to be. Like, he was definitely his own teacher. He taught different than House, and he was good. So, it was cool. He gave me my blue belt. I got my blue belt from Charles. And it was still a rough time though, you know what I mean? Like there was a light dojo storm once that I participated in defending. And this guy came in from Nova União and it was just on, bro. It was the weirdest thing. I came up the stairs. The original Charles Gracie is across the street and up the street from where it is now. And you would go up a flight of stairs and the mats were immediately to your left when you turned. And I see this guy on top of a dude who he w he was smaller than the guy he was fighting. The Charles guy was a lot bigger, but he was finishing the guy. He got up and I could see there was some back and forth, and I knew it was an unfriendly scenario. They were like, "Deesh, you gotta squab at this dude, bro. He's, it's on, And it wasn't punching, it was pure jujitsu. The thing is, I was at a supreme psychological disadvantage because I had just been going through all of Mark Lehman's tape, which were all Nova União guys. And there was this one particular guy whose name I forget, and he was one of the most beautiful and poetic purple belts I've ever seen. Remember when everybody had the leopard style dyed hair?
Mhm.
Um, this guy had that, and he was incredible, but he died in a car accident around the time like everything got hyped for him. He died in a car accident. I'm blanking on his name right now. He was incredible.
I remember the hair, I don't remember the name.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was a purple, but he used to be in all those Mark Lehman tapes, bro.
Mhm.
And he was incredible. So because I had been studying that guy, I'm actually deeply in fear of Nova União psychologically right now because I'm just watching highlight reels of stuff. So I'm not fully present. I go after the guy. I'm not gonna lie, he didn't do anything special, but I wasn't fully present and he caught me. And while I'm fighting the guy, the dude who we had previously beat is on the phone with Charles, and then he called one more dude who was a purple belt, Sanzio, who was Brazilian. So I'm going, and I'll never forget this, bro. I'm getting arm barred. He's got the mount, and I'm trying to defend, and da da da. And he lays back, and he takes my arm. And as I look to my left, I see Sanzio standing at the far side of the mat, holding a crumpled up gi and a purple belt. And so I tap and I sit up, and I am pissed. I am disappointed in myself. I feel like I got betrayed what I said I was trying to learn. I was really upset. I wasn't crying or nothing, but I was disappointed in myself. And Sanzio said something to him in Portuguese. He said something back. I looked at that dude, and in my brain, I was like, you're absolutely about to get fucked up. Like, you're fucked up. Sanzio came out with that shit on, and he obliterated that man, like, repeatedly, like, repeatedly. And so, like, I learned a lot in that moment about, like, what it means when you fight not believing in yourself.
Mm.
Even though I've done it tons of times after, but I learned that day, like, cause it's okay to get tapped out by anybody ultimately, but it always feels worse when you get submitted by someone you know you're better than, but you know what I mean? You make that mistake, you allow that space, you whatever. And so, it was still a rough time for jujitsu. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of, clicks and you know what I mean, whatever. And then uh, not long after getting my blue belt, I competed a little bit. I did fine. One of my clips was on 101 submissions, volume 2. Uh, yeah, in the gi, Ezekiel choke. Um, and I was enjoying myself, but then family and kids made me had to kind of stall stuff out for a while. And then I was writing for On the Mat at the time. I was always writing about jujitsu, and I was always training, just kind of floating around, but not really consistent in any way because I was just trying to be a family man and everything. And then, I kept writing, did a lot of writing for On the Mat. Eddie Goldman back in the day, shout out Eddie Goldman, NHB News. I wrote for NHB News. I wrote for Valley Tudo News. I did a lot of different stuff like that. It didn't pay, but I didn't care. And then after a very long, like on and off kind of hiatus, Gumby from Half Gracie, who is a very decorated and respected OG from the Mountain View days, he started before me, but around the same time. He said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to start my own school. What's your goals in jujitsu?" And I was like, "Man, I just want to be a legit purple. If I could just be a legit purple, I would be happy. Like I don't even care about black, but can I just level up a little bit more?" And I got my purple, brown, and black from Gumby over time.
Yeah.
It was not overnight. I did jujitsu half my life. I started when I was 27, right? I'm 56, and I've been a black belt for like 4 years. I think it'll be year 4. I think it'll be year 4. Like, so I was always train stop, train stop, train stop. And so,
And a
if you're
lot of
some
people are in that boat. A lot of people are in that boat, and it's okay. I mean, if you keep on, it's always there for you when you want to come back.
Man, it is, and so my advice to middle-aged dads doing jujitsu is like always just keep one pinky toe on the mat. That's how I did it. So, I did a lot of solo drills at home that I made up on my own because I would say, Gumby, how can I get better at jujitsu when I'm not here? And he was like, I don't know. I always have people. He was like, I don't know. So I started making up solo drills. I started making up, and I would kind of run myself through certain things. Like I could barely train from blue into purple. My training was very rare, and I used solo drills to get my timing and my structure in order. So, guys, don't give up. Just allow yourself to keep one pinky toe on the mat. Watch videos, read books. I think reading books is a lost art in jiu-jitsu. Everybody's just trying to look for the viral clip. You got to read books, man.
It's interesting with the solo drills. I do think that there's some advantage if you're uncoordinated in a specific movement to getting that movement repped. But I think the bigger advantage is that while you're doing this movement, you're thinking about jujitsu. You're keeping that pinky toe in the water.
100%,
And you're
man.
not, I think the marginal gains after, say, blue belt of doing solo drills is pretty low for most people, with the exception of some very specialized moves. I mean, I was trying to work on a shotgun sweep from De La Hiva, and that's kind of a tricky, weird, bridging, twisting, spiraling motion.
Right.
And I didn't understand the motion until I figured out how to do it as a solo drill. But then I didn't need to rep it a million more times. Like, oh, now I get it. It provided that isolation lab where I could just, without having to worry about another body,
Right.
work on that ridging up on one leg off of a raised object while twisting the other way and shooting the other leg straight. And I don't think there was any value in the reps, but there was value in figuring out the drill to get that first couple of reps in.
Now, see, I have a very probably highly biased perspective of solo drilling because I had to. There was, you know what I mean? Like I was, juggling kids, 2, sometimes 3 jobs. I had to do solo drills, yeah. So my belief, and I know like there's a lot of really decorated people who are way better than me, like including yourself, that that you know have medium to like Roger Gracie's like drills. Why bother? And there's books on solo drilling, and
Yeah.
and so
And
the reason.
I have produced a DVD back in the day
Did
on
you?
that
Did
had
you?
a lot
You
of,
had a solo drill one?
I had
Okay.
a solo drill one. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's,
I believe in solo drills for this reason. I believe at any belt level, but specifically white, you know so little. You need to do solo drills to get the fundamental movement and structure
Mhm.
down, right? I believe that solo drills build presence in the actual role. If you can get to a point where you have presence in the actual role, because I know one of Roger's main points, which is accurate, is that, yeah, but nobody, like if you're doing an armbar from the closed guard drill, right? Yeah, but that person's not defending, right? They're not trying to stop you
Mhm.
from doing it. My counter to that is yes. However, presence from doing the solo drills gives you real time ability to innovate nuances as they appear. If you're asking yourself, am I doing this armbar right? One, you're probably not. And two, that person's about to jailbreak and Godzilla up out of there. But if you've been pivoting, pulling the arm, right? You know what I mean? Getting your shoulder blades off the mat, making sure you have the accurate grip, then your chances of being able to innovate in that real time moment are more important than anything else.
I mean, by the time you start talking world champions
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
people in the running for world champions, it's not a random selection of jiu-jitsu people. Say what you want. Like the story is always, I was so weak and I was so small and I was so uncoordinated. And then I went off and in the Shaolin temple, excuse me, in the jiu-jitsu dojo, I this boy became a man. Yeah. I mean, there's footage of BJ Penn sitting there at Matt's side, scratching his own ear with his big toe.
Bro,
That is athletic. Like, I don't want to write off the work that these guys have put in, but they
right.
are all starting at a much higher than average athletic potential and probably at a much higher than average ability to learn things quickly
Let me
potential.
tell you, BJ Penn probably has and still has the highest jujitsu IQ of another human being I've ever seen. I mean, ever. I've seen a lot of great people, and I will never frown on any of them. But I observed BJ Penn at white belt all the way through. He was always on another level. But what he also had is he was the rare mix of raw skills, which there are few of in jujitsu, IQ, and support. Bro,
Mm.
I didn't know what his parents did back then. His parents were really rich. I didn't know that. But like what I did know is that like where you had the Half Gracie gym on El Camino, when they originally came out, there was like a Holiday Inn on that same side of the street, about 5 lights up, maybe 4 lights up. They were in that thing. I remember coming into the Holiday Inn and there was like a desk, a dresser. The dresser was covered in medals, gold medals already. And I remember looking at all those medals and being like, I have never seen this many gold medals by anybody in jiu-jitsu in my life. Now, granted, all of them had, this was all of theirs, but you couldn't
Mhm.
see the wood. And it's because their work ethic was crazy. Their pops was funding their ability to train twice a day, which at that point, 1999, 2000, nobody trained 2 days a week, two times a week a day. And so when you look at his trajectory to black, it is very easy to miss that his dad had the money, was willing to support, and that his son had the skill and the drive. That's rare. Something's usually missing, and that's what makes the person not become great. He had all the above, plus a supportive family. Bro, he was destined for all of it.
So how do we, because I mean, you're kind of known for talking a lot about stoicism. Maybe take people through what you define as stoicism and then how it applies to training, in particular jiu-jitsu, but in general martial arts.
So Stoicism is a Greek philosophy that comes out of Greece and Rome. It was really kind of popularized by a guy named Zeno, he basically sold cloth for his dad, a very specific kind of cloth that was purple. And it was royal. Like, when you see the royal purple, that's what they sold. So he has a ship with his guys. He's getting ready to take it in. A big storm hits. He gets shipwrecked and he's stuck on an island for a while. Eventually he gets back and he's like, yo, what happened to my life? He's trying to make sense of it. He ends up going into a library, reading something he liked, and he started trying to figure out how he thought. So I think he went to a couple of different schools. Then he started like kind of looking at his own ideas. And basically, Stoicism is a philosophy that uses different emotional and mental exercises to get you to de-escalate your emotions, not suppress them, de-escalate them, and then choose to make the best decision after you've, kind of gone through the who, what, where, when, why, whys, right? So there's four basic virtues to Stoic philosophy, which is wisdom, right? The pursuit of knowledge, right? Courage, right? Um, temperance, right? Meaning that you're a balanced person with discipline. A lot of people don't use that word; they'll just say discipline, right? And then justice, right? Being a just person, right? So you have different practices to kind of build in these four lanes. And then you also have, different essays and tools to work on anger, right? So it's not that you don't, I think the biggest mistake that people have when they think of Stoic is they think this person doesn't feel. They think this person doesn't want to feel, and that this person is trying to transcend feeling so they can kind of come up with this ones and zeros binary equation into whatever their decision is. That's not really it. In fact, that's not Stoicism for sure. What Stoicism asks you to do is allow yourself to feel everything, all of the pain, all of the fear, all of the sadness, right? All of the joy, but then put it through these filters of wisdom, courage, discipline, and justice, and then take the most wise, courageous, right? Balanced and just decision, irrespective of how you feel. So you might be like, I'm hella angry. However, I'm not going to, right? I'm going to respond like this. And so that's really what the essence of being a Stoic is. But it's hard work. It's hard to do, but it's easy in that I think with a lot of philosophy and a lot of a lot of people are rightly on a self-help journey or, in a lot of pain, whatever. You can get lost in the quotes and the big quoting. The Marcus Aurelius said, Seneca tells us, the great Epictetus once wrote, right? But what happens is a lot of those people don't share the practices of those who wrote this way that we're all in awe of. So it's like, there's things like voluntary hardship, which is you volunteer to deal with less so that you can have a higher respect for things and have more gratitude in your life. So
So
I
what did
remember
that look like in practice?
yeah. So when voluntary hardship looks like I'm going to sleep on the floor next to my bed. I'm not going to sleep in the bed. I'm going to sleep on the floor. Now I might have like a blanket, but I won't have my electric blankie. I won't, you know what I mean? I'm going to sleep on the floor. I might not even use a pillow. Right. And so I'll do that. And, among other things, it makes you just kind of gracious one that you have a bed, but when you see a homeless person, before you might have been, look at this guy. Now you're like, damn, that shit hella hurts the hip. Let me give this guy a sandwich or whatever, right? Like you have a little bit more empathy. It looks like eating a salad and putting nothing on it. Just like eating the lettuce, tomatoes, eating it as it is. Right now, you may be like, man, I'm used to putting a whole bunch of ranch or Italian or whatever, but this is allowing you to live a simple life. Stoics led very simple, like non-complicated lives. So even if they ate something heavy, like a steak or whatever, it would just be simply grilled, cut. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to
That's
put it.
that's a big statement when one of the most famous and most quoted Stoics is Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was a Roman emperor, but the thing about Marcus Aurelius is that, he was in a high pursuit of knowledge and apparently had a very high adaptation for philosophy at a very young age, but he pursued it, right? He pursued it. And so he was also very sick most of his life, but he also fought on the battlefield. But he wasn't known to be a warrior. So he had to really train himself. He had to be disciplined. So, a lot of the things that he had or that we know him for, he was not born with, but he had to cultivate despite having this great opportunity to be an emperor. And so for him, you know, like he had a brother who was the exact opposite. Because he knew he was close to the emperor, he would, drink as much as he wanted, run around, and be in the bars, acting crazy, not disciplined on the battlefield. And these were the kinds of things and the people that he was around. And his book, Meditations, was never really meant to be out. It was a diary that people found and preserved, you know what I mean? And it's really good. So I mean, learning Stoic practices though is just as important as learning the quotes. And so there are a lot of different books and authors that I suggest so you get the practice part and not
Hmm.
just get the I'm hyped up and let me go take an ice bath while I listen to, some Marcus Aurelius quotes, right? Like Donald Robertson has a book called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. Beautiful book. Almost anything by Ryan Holiday. He's actually written a book for every virtue, right? So there's The Right Thing Right Now, which I think is about justice. Discipline is Destiny, which obviously is about like temperance. It's having balance. There is Courage is Calling. And so, for everyone, right? There's a thing you can cultivate. What I would
I've read Do the Right Thing Right Now. I haven't read the others yet.
I have that one, but I haven't read it, but I've
Oh,
read most of the others. So,
you
you know
complete me.
yeah. Oh, my buddy, right? So it's like we, meaning like anyone listening, right? Like we already know probably what's kind of wrong. Maybe you're hung up by anxiety. Maybe you're quick to anger. You have anger issues. Maybe you are too fearful, right? Maybe you are a person who has a lot of things in your life, but you lean into extremes, extreme drinking, extreme smoking, extreme emotions, extreme like sexual gratification. You know what I'm saying? And so what Stoicism is going to help you do, or what it can be used as a tool is to turn that down, find your real self, and find a middle path, right? That allows you to thrive wherever you are, like in your interpersonal relationships, in your romantic space and your business, right? And so yeah, there's a lot of really interesting practices that you can do from where you are. So don't think you have to listen to Adisa, go read all this Greek stuff and whatever. You could just go on YouTube or even into a thing like ChatGPT or Claude.ai and say, you know, I suffer from extremely low self-esteem. What Stoic practices could I start doing now to build my self-esteem that are easy, right? And it'll start telling you, not just quotes, but practices. That's what I think people should look into. Because I'm a lover of Stoicism, but I'm not
Mhm.
translating nothing in Latin for nobody.
Well, you mentioned this idea of voluntary discomfort or voluntary hardship, and that is a practice. And, I suppose you going and getting the shit beat out of your body at Half Gracie was an example of voluntary hardship because you went back. The first time might have been a mistake. The second
Yeah,
time,
yeah. But I went back because I believed it was authentically valuable. I was like, look at
Mhm,
these smaller dudes really being able to win over bigger dudes. And
mhm,
you, meaning me, are supremely small, supremely weak, not, you know what I mean? Like I was physically fast in terms of running and I had a little bit of hand-eye coordination, but I was not a dynamic basketball player or,
mhm.
fill in the blank of whatever. The only thing I was pretty decent at was soccer. But I hadn't done soccer in years and I was an adult now with kids. So, what better thing to do than just try to figure out how to defend yourself so at least you don't just get the crap beat out of you in front of your significant other. That'd be great. But as I came into jujitsu, I realized being, from my era, I'm 56. So I'm a guy who grew up on Karate Kid. I'm a guy who grew up on the Kung Fu TV show. I grew up, with the VHS era watching Bruce Lee. I used to go to martial arts like weapon stores as a kid taking my, bike route money so I could get a throwing star, which they were selling to kids at that time, right? Or, try to get something you could stab people with, and they'd give them to me.
That's my
Um,
story exactly, except throwing stars weren't legal in Canada. So I had to make my own either tin snips.
Dude, I had throwing stars, and it was the one, the one that had the thing you could put it on a belt buckle? They used to have these stars you
Oh,
could put
yeah.
on a belt buckle. It was one of those, and they worked.
Mm.
I was throwing them at this wood wall behind my house, and so it was crazy. But so coming from that, I believed that whoever taught you how to fight would also teach you philosophy,
Ah.
right? 'Cause
Ah.
right? I come from this thing. And look, bro, I mean, it's not news. Ralph Gracie was not teaching philosophy in Mountain View. He was teaching fighting. And if you got a good idea from doing that practice, then that was good for you. But he was just trying to make killers, bro. You know what I mean? And so I really realized quickly that a lot of other people there weren't thinking like me, right? And I don't mean that as any kind of disrespect. They were there to fight and learn how to fight, and they were getting what they came for. I, however, was getting most of what I came for. I needed more. Now, I was already a practicing Muslim. I converted to Islam in 1990. And so, I knew that the Prophet Muhammad was a wrestler. I knew he had won in wrestling. I knew that they have this thing called futua in Islam, which are the prophetic sports, right? These are sports that Muslim children are encouraged to do. And they are wrestling slash grappling slash jiu-jitsu, okay? Swimming, horseback riding, and archery. Those 4 things are what futua are made of, okay? And so that's why whether you go to Afghanistan or you go to Dagestan or Kyrgyzstan, any of the stands, there's always
Mhm.
some kind of wrestling there,
Yeah.
right? And so it's a big part of Islamic culture. So in my faith,
And they were
we're
parts
encouraged.
of Persian culture
Yeah,
before there
Persian, yeah,
wasn't Islam.
exactly. I just did a podcast with a guy who knows a lot of that Persian wrestling stuff. They had these things called the Zirkhana, which were what they called houses of wisdom. So you see those big bats those big wooden bats for strength training. They had this
Mhm.
shield thing. They do all these different push-ups and feats of strength. And in the Zirkhana, they also did poetry, which is crazy. But there was a lot of poetry also done in between sets and things like that. So I knew that that was a part of it. And so what I didn't realize was that when I met Elio, I already loved jiu-jitsu and I planned to do it for sure, for sure. But when I met Elio Gracie, I decided I was doing jiu-jitsu forever. Forever. I was like, until they put me back in the earth, I'm doing this. And so at the same time, because I grew up with so much low self-esteem, I never thought I was going to be a black belt. Legit. In my life, having a black belt was never in the cards for me, in my heart. I just kept going back because it was something that I loved. And what I didn't realize was that going back would get me the black belt in time. I didn't realize that.
Mhm.
I was just like, I'll never be good enough forever. That's
It's
fine.
almost like you were focusing on the process and not the end destination.
Absolutely. In
Mhm.
fact, one of my childhood friends said, "You know what's weird?" I was like, "What?" He said, "Never in my life do I remember you saying that you wanted a black belt. I never remember you saying it. Ever." He goes, would not see you for years, but you were still practicing. I wouldn't see you for more years. You were still practicing. He goes, I knew you loved it, but I never heard you say you wanted it. I said, that's because I was so convinced I would never get it that I just never bothered to say it.
Mhm.
It was too far, you know? But I used my time on the mat at house to start reading the Book of Five Rings. Now I'm reading The Art of Peace by O Sensei, the guy that, right? Because I'm thinking, well, maybe I can pull in Aikido philosophy, right? Maybe Aikido philosophy can work for Jiu-Jitsu. I'm reading works and quotes by Jigoro Kano. I'm thinking, well, maybe we could still use the judo philosophy, bring it in. But quite honestly, as a practitioner of jujitsu, as much of so much of it did apply, I felt like a lot maybe didn't. Maybe because of the intensity. I was speaking with a friend once and he said, have you ever noticed that the traditional martial arts that tend not to work are the ones with big philosophies? And the ones that really do work tend not to. He said, like, look at Thai fighting. What's the philosophy of Thai fighting? I don't know. But if they start kicking you in that knee, you're going to know what time it is. And those elbows start spinning, right? He's like, look at American wrestling, right? American
Work
wrestling,
harder.
yeah, American wrestling doesn't have a philosophy, right? Except keep going, right? And so he goes, then you got jujitsu. And he said, maybe Kyokushin karate, right? Or Enshin, those like really hard, like we're actually, you know, flying knees and all that are in the game. He's like, and boxing, right? American boxing. He's like, those things don't have a philosophy per se. but you look at things that do have more of a philosophy, and those guys tend to get beat up and choked out. So he was like, I think that's weird.
So here we are talking about the junction of philosophy and a martial art that we'd like to believe works. What does
Right?
that mean about us, and what does that mean about our martial art?
I mean, I think that the problem with, and my argument back in the day, one of the first articles I wrote for Vale Tudo News was this thing saying like, look, if Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu works quick, like remember in those days they were like, in 6 months, it's your
Mhm.
equivalent to a black belt in any other martial art. And if I'm honest, 6 months after being at House, I ended up going to this judo school and I did tap one of the instructors like more than once as a white belt at Hal
Mhm.
Gracie's at the bottom of the barrel in Mountain View. And I tapped an instructor like legit several times. I was blown away that was the case. But here's the point. It's not about me. And I mean this. You look at guys like Jordan Peterson, right? And they'll be like, you want to be a monster and then, you want to control it. You go be an absolute monster. And you're like, okay. Now here, jiu-jitsu can make you a monster in 6 months. If we're being honest, in 6 months, 2 days a week, you'll be better than most of the men you know in your life. Period. If you go 3 times a week or you decide to be even casually competitive, like you're the most dangerous man in the room in a lot of circles. It doesn't mean you're invincible, but
Mhm.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu absolutely works. Here's my point. If I can make you a monster in 6 months, but I can't give you empathy, but I can't make you care about wisdom, if I can't make you care about justice, if I can't show you the importance of having balance in your life, it's dangerous that I teach you this art.
I couldn't agree more. It's like letting a little kid run around with a shotgun.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
and
at that point, I was a white belt.
yeah.
So shut up, white belt. Nobody cares about your fake ass black Miyagi-Do. Get out of here, right? But I always knew it was a problem. And then when you look now, okay, let's run down the list of the scandals we're roughly aware of right now. Atos, for shame. We don't even need to have that whole conversation, but we should. Okay, that's crazy. That guy Isaac, who comes out of Kingsway, running with Gordon Ryan. Okay, crazy. His lady's on the run, isn't she gone? What's her name?
Natalie Santoro.
Yeah, yeah, on the run, right? Crazy. How many people, I'm not even gonna name any of them because I don't wanna demean them. How many people have we had as champions in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who turn out to be complete loons, who need to be institutionalized or be on some kind of medicine? Oh, and then whatever's going on with the checkmat scandal, right? There's a whole checkmat scandal, right? So this is me not trying to know what the scandals are.
Huh.
And then every time I still say, let's have a conversation about philosophy in the space of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I still get all the pushback, right? But like, can we still afford to act like some of these schools aren't low-grade cults? Can we acknowledge that? Can we acknowledge that some of these cult of personality people have been financially abusive, sexually abusive, physically abusive to a lot of their own students and stuff like that? Like, we have to acknowledge,
Financially abusive?
dude, stuff's upside down, bro. It's
Yeah.
it's horrifying. And I'm not saying be a stoic and pretend to be Mr. Miyagi. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm saying I am a deeply, viciously flawed human, but I'm just trying to be cool, show some people jujitsu before I get back in the dirt and enjoy the journey, right? And use it for good while I got it, right? And meanwhile,
Mm.
a lot of schools and a lot of individuals are out of balance, at peace with being out of balance, and nobody even wants to talk about that this lack of character in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu isn't the cancer of the sport. I never thought a lack of character would be the cancer of the sport, but that's where we're at right now.
I do think that jiu-jitsu is having a little bit of a Me Too moment right now. Like we went from Me Too 10 years ago, basically the peaking with, well, Harvey Weinstein,
Right, right,
and then kind of a wild swing the other way.
right. No, absolutely.
Grab him by the pussy.
Yeah,
We'll elect an adjudicated rapist who has very, very credible, multiple rape allegations. That's kind of the counter swing to Me Too. And now I think it's swinging back a little bit. I mean, we have to acknowledge that one sexual assault allegation could be fake. These things do happen.
No
I think they
question.
happen a lot less often than people would like it to be able to write it off. But by the time you're at multiple allegations, or as happened in Atos, every single woman leaves, or
Is
virtually every
bouncing
single woman.
and being like, I'm no longer, and you
Yeah,
just watch everything roll out.
yeah.
It's frightening, man.
So yes, there hasn't been hasn't been adjudicated in a court of law, but when a lot of people that I know are like, I am so hard out,
Yeah,
they
all the
it
way.
yeah, it,
And so the thing is that, again, though, if I speak about philosophy, if I speak about Islam, if I speak about Taoism, which a lot of times, so I got a podcast on Substack called Bishop Chronicles. I bring a lot of
mhm,
people to talk about Stoic philosophy and jujitsu or just one or the other. And so, I'm having a good time on there. I'm enjoying the conversations and sharing just the fundamentals. Again, I am not a classically trained anything. The only thing I've been classically trained in is jujitsu. I have a GED, right? Now, I've lectured at Lehigh University on Islam. I've lectured at Harvard on Islam. I just put up a Harvard lecture on chess and hip hop behind the paywall that I did at Harvard. I totally forgot about it, like, 2016. But, like, the idea is that I don't care why you got into jujitsu. As long as it's for positive reasons, it's cool. But here's the deal, there's never been a more important time for you to get into Stoic philosophy than right now. Right now, are you looking at what's happening in the world? Are you looking at what's happening to our democracy? Are you looking at what's happening, the tension in the streets? Like, and it's not about like, worst case scenario, I got to fight to the death. You may have to. It's unlikely. You may have to. It's unlikely. But the other idea is you should want to be a capable adult in this time and be able to help yourself and others. I'm not doing jujitsu just for me. I've told people before, a lot of times jujitsu starts with you, and if you stay on the path, it ends with other people. Jiu-jitsu ain't about me at 56 anymore. These old ass knees, this back is just itching to get thrown out. My back is like, do jiu-jitsu again and see if I allow your ass to walk tomorrow. It's always threatening me. Knees are always threatening me. Lungs and heart always threatening me, but I keep going back. I'm not going back for me. I'm going back for the person who can't fight for themselves. I'm going back for the old person who can't run with everybody in that moment. And maybe I can pick them up, right? But like, we have to understand that it's not enough to do jujitsu. We have to think about, how are we using jujitsu to help make us a better person? How are we using jujitsu to help us be contributing to our local community? Don't think about changing the world. How are you using jujitsu in your local community?
I was
Right.
talking about this with an endurance athlete who had done a bunch of triathlon, had done a bunch of paddling, had done a bunch of cycling. So was making the argument that cycling is one of the most selfish sports out there because there's so much money in it, right? Like if you want to get sponsored and lead a sponsored life as a professional marathon canoeist, good luck.
Right,
That's
right,
not going
right.
to happen.
Right,
Uh,
right.
You'd be lucky to eat one package of ramen a day and hitchhike across the country. But if you're a professional cyclist, you can make some decent money.
Yeah.
And essentially all of cycling, especially once you start talking about the pack dynamics, is not how do you lift other people up? It's how do you take advantage of other people?
Mm,
This is his argument, and
right.
it tracks somewhat with the high level cyclists that I know. So I'm biased there, and
Right,
there
right.
goes my entire audience of pro cyclists and wannabe pro cyclists. But it's not the first group of people I've alienated. Uh, so ultimately, jujitsu. Obviously, if I'm got a small group of training partners and I make them better, I become better.
Right.
But at the same time, it's also a selfish thing because uh, the short term benefit of me showing you exactly what I'm doing to set up my super special knee bar attack is that my super special knee bar attack stops working in the short term. So there's a
Not
short
only
term
that, you'll get
disincentive.
your knee bar. Yeah, yeah. It's crazy. Like, you'll get, like, I still remember when I taught somebody the Darce super early and then they Darsed me. Like, I was like, "I shouldn't have," right? And so, like, that's always a part of the journey. What I think is the weird thing about jujitsu is that so many people come into it from a place of humility, of fear, haven't been bullied, whatever. And one of the saddest things ever, it happens in every gym where someone who comes in not knowing anything becomes good. And it's only at the point where you see they have acquired some skill that you realize that they too are a bully. They
Mm,
treat people rude. Right? And you're like, "Oh my God, bro." Like
yeah.
you, right? And so that's part of why I think
But so much of that
philosophy.
is from the top down. Like there are
No,
people.
no.
I
I
Go
think
ahead,
it
make
deals
your
with why
case.
people come in. You tell me. I think when people are unclear on their why, or they lie to themselves about why they came into the gym, it directly impacts the way they roll and the way they carry themselves in the gym. But if a person is like, I'm telling people like I wanna get fit, but the truth is my dad used to kick the shit out of me, so when I'm rolling, that person we call a
Mm,
spaz, that's PTSD. He's not a spaz. He's fighting his dad. He's not even rolling with you, bro. He's
mm.
fighting his dad, right? The person who got knocked out in front of their girlfriend, the reason they don't have any control is because 'cause they're not trying to go out like that again, and so they're really choppy, and that's why you gotta, like, calm them down. But you tell me what you think.
Well, I don't disagree that there are people fighting with demons instead of training with training partners. That exists for sure. And that's a separate thing, and that's also a top-down thing, because if you're an instructor and you just want that toughest bunch of sons of bitches in your training room, you might let that spazzy guy who's fighting for his absolute life for every drill go unchecked, because it's going to create a tougher bunch of guys.
Mm.
But if you're the instructor and you're like, hang on, this isn't right, you might take the guy aside and try and, dude, go to
Talk them back a
therapy.
bit.
Dude,
Yeah.
you can't go that hard.
Right.
Dude, if you keep on going that hard, I'm going to kick you out for the safety of my students and your own safety, by the way. And then if, on the other hand, you have an instructor who will absolutely needs to be top alpha dog and will do whatever he needs to do to
To keep
punish people who even
yeah,
getting
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
close
yeah,
to
yeah.
him, then people internalize that, and that's the right way to be. So my theory of top down doesn't account for the guy coming in with severe trauma and severe psychological issues, for
But
sure. That
but we can't know that, and a lot of times, I'm not even sure that the new customer knows it yet, right? Because they're just trying to cure whatever, their initial thing is, and so I was telling one of my friends back in the UK, in Leeds, this guy who he's a boxing instructor at Castleford Boxing, in Pontefract, and, outside of Leeds, and we were talking about this, like, how people tend to not know their why. And I
mm,
said, you need to give people 45 to 60 days to observe them and try to get a sense of their why. Because everybody's going to come in saying, I just want to be fit. I saw this in UFC. I listen to Joe Rogan, right? Those are all, but under that answer, there's always a second answer. And so you need time to observe them and then circle back and they'll be like, actually, um, I was jumped and I didn't know what to do. Actually, right? And then it's cool. The
mm,
the the actual why, as I was explaining to Tony, his name is Tony Leo. I said, the why doesn't matter because your answer is gonna be, I'm gonna help you and we're gonna grow together through it. That's always the answer. You know what I mean? But I think top down makes sense, but the problem is back to philosophy, Stoic philosophy, there's this thing called the dichotomy of control, right? Like you can only control so much. So
mhm,
right, at Half Gracie, coming from the old days when Half Gracie was just a death cauldron on the mats. And if you made it, you made it. If you didn't, you didn't. Now I'm telling people to be like whatever. I'm not really in control if they can grasp it. I'm not really in control if they take this sentiment like sincerely, I coach the kids class. Sometimes the kids can be extra rough, especially when they run out of techniques. Like they're like, "Well, I don't know what I'm doing. Here goes the elbow on the neck. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna give you the old school strangle because I can't make the chokehold work." I've been telling them, listen, think about how you want people to feel when class is done. Do you want your training partners to feel like they're weak? Do you want your training partners to feel like you don't care if you lean on on their neck with your elbow just so you can say you won the match, you know, like, do you want them to feel like they're not good enough? There's a way to still give your all and maintain
Mhm.
respect and things like that. And, I tell the kids, think about, are you becoming more wise in jujitsu? Are you able to take anything from this class and use it in the classroom? Use it at home with your siblings, use it when you're frustrated with your parent. Like, I want you to think about how jujitsu can help you be better. Because I said, honestly, like, being good at jujitsu doesn't matter if you're not actually a good person.
Amen.
You know, I really believe that.
So you mentioned your why, but I'm fairly sure that your why has changed over time, right? Over the 27 years that you've been training, it's probably mutated a few times and evolved into something new, hasn't it?
Yeah, in the beginning, it was just hardcore, self-preservation, feeling like I wasn't good enough and I need, again, at the time, I was like, I didn't have a gun. My now ex-wife didn't want a gun in the house. I really didn't want one either. So I was like, I'll be the gun, right? So then I started going to jujitsu. When you start, it's scary. You're just getting your ass kicked regularly. And then even, I think the biggest lie that we tell people, especially in the beginning, is that it gets easier. It never actually gets easier. It's kind of like lifting weights, right? If I give you a little bit more than you can push, like you might power through it and you'll get through it. But through that consistency, you'll actually get stronger. The weight doesn't get easier to pick up. You get stronger. It's the same thing in jujitsu. People
Mhm.
think like, why all these people leave at blue? Bro, because they think once they get that blue belt on, all right, now I can start kicking people's asses and letting them know what time it is. And then it's like, nah, homie, you just got jumped into the gang. Now it's really on. And you learn this whole world that you never knew existed. And then they quit,
Right.
and then they quit. So I think that letting people know it's always hard and that you weren't good at it. Every time I teach a move, I say, I wasn't good at this. And there was a time when I didn't know it. So I don't want you to think because you see me doing it hella clean right now that I was always this way. And don't hold yourself to this standard. I want you to try to learn the move.
Mm.
Just try and learn the move and be okay with not only not getting it right tonight, but trying it and rolling and letting and then people get past and whatever. You've got to be okay with that. Because if you don't try the move, we'll never know what you're capable of.
Right. So you mentioned, to jump back a little bit, some of the practices of Stoicism as opposed to the sound bites.
Yeah.
So what would be some examples of other Stoic practices? And they don't have to be examples in jiu-jitsu. They could be examples in life, but
Here we go.
whatever.
Got you. So this poster, you can't really see it. This is what they call a stoic calendar. You see all this black at the top, this lower white. So all that at the top, those are dots. Those are really little dots. And every dot represents a week of my life. So I have it filled up to right here. Okay. And then on Friday, I'll fill it in again. And on Friday, I'll fill it in again. And what this is memento mori means remember death. And the reason you practice remembrance of death is because we are not guaranteed tomorrow. We are just we're not. And every week you see how many weeks you've been here and you see I'll never make it to this. I know I won't make it. I don't know. This may be the last dot. I may not make it to the next Friday. And so by practicing remembering that you will die, who and what is really important to you starts to bubble to the surface, right? Discipline and gratitude are two of the main things you tend to get from it, right? Because you know what, man, dude, I might not live tonight, man. Like I'm gonna call my dad and say, you know what, bro, I'm sorry we're not good, but I do love you. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. Or you know what? I never did go back to college the way I said I'm gonna go to. Stop pretending you have next year. Call, just take the one class online just to get started, right? I always said I wanted to take my health serious, but I don't do nothing. And here I am eating 100 bonbons. Let me just walk around my block. Not fast, just walk around my block. That's how you have gratitude, right? Discipline, right? Again, like maybe I could start eating a little less, right? Knowing that you're going to die, remembering that you're going to die. And it's not just for you, it's for other people. So people you take advantage of because you're used to seeing them, you're not going to see them. Call them, let them know you love them, seeing if you could do a favor for them. That's like a practice, memento mori. right? Another one is amor fati, right? Which means loving your fate. This is a hard one. A lot of things are really hard to come to grips with. I remember when I learned about amor fati, I was in the middle of a hellacious divorce. And I was like, why would I be grateful that met her? Now I'm, you know what I'm saying, over here arguing with people about child support. Kids ain't calling me back, all kind of drama, you know what I'm saying? It's frustrating. And here I am 7 years later, so grateful that she left me. Like, it sounds
Yeah.
listen, guys, I'm not frowning on marriage, like, at all, right? But what I'm telling you is I know I wouldn't have left, right? I know I wouldn't have left. And although I was shattered, so suicidal. Anybody that knows me will tell you, when his marriage ended, I was worried about him. As soon as I told Gumby, Gumby was like, "Yeah, let me get you a therapist real quick." Ooh, ooh. Yeah, you got an appointment tomorrow. Like, he didn't wait because I was not okay, right? And so, you know, I ended up loving my fate. I love where my life is now. I don't think I would have made it to black belt if I would have stayed married. I don't think I would have made it. I don't think I would be in Stoic philosophy. I don't think I would have renewed the way in which I live my faith of Islam was renewed, right? And all these other things. And it's like, I will never understand why I had to feel all of that pain to get to this point of peace. I wish it hadn't happened that way, right? Especially for my children, but life is complicated and it's hard to convey things at sometimes. And you don't even know why everything happens. In Islam, they have this thing called hikmah. It means wisdom. And you're supposed to believe that when something tragic happens, that there is a wisdom you cannot yet see in a thing. And if you give yourself time and space, you can sometimes find that wisdom. You can find that hikmah. And then like, what was the hikmah in that? Right. And so I found different little wisdoms in the emotional and psychological distance that I got from my divorce. And it still doesn't feel good. I'm not going to act like I wake up, tap dancing and whatnot. But there are absolutely other days that I have because I know that there were things I was experiencing. Had I remained in the marriage I was in, I wouldn't be experiencing it. I know it. So I learned to love my fate.
Does loving your fate rely on there being a good outcome, though? Because you would argue that your outcome now is good. But how do you love your fate when you've got, I don't know, I'll pick an example, terminal cancer, and you've got 3 years left?
No, no, no. This stuff is heavy, right? Like, I didn't say it was easy. I just said it was a way to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? It could be that you pass with uh a depth of personal dignity, love and compassion and empathy that you inspire others to be better humans. There was a woman, she was an amazing person. I can't talk about her too much, but her name was Florence. Anyway, Florence had terminal cancer and she died with the most peace and joy I've ever seen a human being die with. And if I can die with half of her joy and half of her peace, I will have achieved a beautiful thing. You know, Death is never easy, and I've lost more people after the pandemic from everything but COVID that I've had to study grief immensely. Cicero has a book, I think it's just called On Grieving. We have to, as a society, look to try and learn these kinds of practices, man. There's a reason why when somebody dies and we're at the church all the time, people are losing it. People are diving into the grave. I've seen people dive into the grave and have to get pulled up out of the
Really?
hole because they're on top of it, right? Because
How
people don't know
symbolic.
how to process their grief. We have to learn how to process our grief. There's a book by Cicero called How to Grow Old. Any person in jiu-jitsu get and Cicero, I don't think he was a stoic per se, but it's just some good ideas on how to grow old with grace, how to grieve with grace and dignity, how to frame death so that it's not seen as a punishment. Often in America in the West, we think when someone died, what did they do? Did they make God angry? Did they, you know what I'm saying? But if you realize that death comes with the contract of your first breath. You gotta have a last one, right? So How are you going to live the time you're here? How are you going to honor your own body? How are you going to honor, the people around you who have picked you up? How are you going to honor the people that have done you wrong? Can you deal with them with honor? Are you gonna be consumed by bitterness and how they treated you? This is all stuff that I struggle with. I'm not
Mhm.
talking about things I've conquered. What I'm trying to tell you is that I use Stoic philosophy and my faith, to try to navigate these deeper questions. But it's important to note that with Stoicism, you can be a person of faith, you can be agnostic, meaning you're not really sure if there is a God or if they have any, connection or interaction with you, even if you believe they exist, and you can be an atheist, right? You cannot believe that God exists at all and still practice cultivation of wisdom, courage, right? Balance and justice and experience a lot better the hard things that come to you.
Yeah, you talked about losing a bunch of people in the last 5 years,
Yeah, yeah.
and then before that, you talked about memento mori, and I think losing people, and especially if you're there by the deathbed and watching them take their final breaths, that is the ultimate memento mori. That is a gift that they are giving you. There is no more visceral reminder that you yourself are going to die than watching somebody die in front of you. It's difficult
It is
usually,
very difficult. Um,
but it is a massive gift on their way out.
I was in a hospital room, like a hospice in the UK with someone who was passing away, and I watched them almost until the end. Saw the breathing change, I heard the breathing patterns, I looked at their body, I looked at their hair. It's such a interesting thing to observe, and it makes it really hard to avoid all these human things. We're not always around when people die, and it can give you this
Mhm.
this emotional distance, which is often necessary, right? Because we don't wanna see people you love die or whatever. But this was, I was supporting someone in observing someone they loved and, you know, pass away, and, that absolutely changed me. I saw a guy have a heart attack on a train, and he died, and I was trying to give him CPR with some other people, and they took his body off the train, and we got back into the car, and everybody was just kinda tripping out about what we had just seen, and then as we went down the very next stop, woman comes on with her baby in a carriage, and they sit in his chair. Now everybody on the train knows the guy just died right there. I said, "This was the first memento mori thing that I got." I said to myself, "This train is like life. These seats aren't ours. We think this is my seat." I said, "Someone died and there is a brand new baby sitting in his seat who will never know." No one said, "Hey, somebody just died. You might wanna," right? Like, nobody did that, right? Because that's how this thing works. Somebody gets off the train, somebody gets on. Right now, we're on the train. You and I, in this moment, we're on the train. But one day, we won't be. I always wondered, what was that guy gonna do tomorrow?
Mm.
What was he gonna do tomorrow? How different would he have lived if he knew? Because we get up every day. That guy got up, he had a sandwich, you know what I'm saying? Said, "Hey, I'll call you tomorrow, Lou," whatever. And then he died on the way home. And I remember, like, how shaken I was in that situation. And that was early in my Stoic studies. That was the first memento mori lesson I got.
Mm. Yeah, that's pretty powerful. I mean, in a certain sense, we need people to step off the train because if everybody who had ever lived was still living now,
We'd all be half of us would be
yeah,
in the ocean,
yeah.
right?
So
Like, but let me ask you, I mean, you've worked as a firefighter and all kind of stuff. Like, how have you managed death? When I read your book, I was actually deeply impressed by the grace with which you navigated a lot of death around you. And what
mm,
would you attribute your ability to navigate those moments through?
I wouldn't say that the navigating the first deaths were particularly graceful. I managed to find meaning in it eventually, but sculpting the grief or digging through the layers of grief to get to the meaning, that was an ugly process. So when it's not your brother, when it's not your father, when it's not your mother, your grandmother, your other brother, um, when it's sort of in a professional capacity as a firefighter, certainly some deaths have bothered me more than others, right? Typically, yeah, everybody hates dealing with dead kids.
Yeah.
Um, Even younger people who just, thought they were going to work one day
Yeah.
and they met a car going the other way and now neither person's going to work.
Right.
Uh, but it's a couple layers of meaning or a couple layers of buffer that you have to put up between yourself and that one buffer. And this is something that would have applied to you doing CPR on that guy is with us, some chance, without us, no chance. So it basically detaches responsibility, right? It's not saying I'm responsible for the outcome. Of course, you're trying to do everything you can to save the person,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's not going to work. And they got themselves into that problem, and we're here to try and help. And it may work. Any chance that they have of not dying from, say, that heart attack is because we're there pounding on the chest and giving oxygen and all the rest of it, hooking up the defibrillator. But if it doesn't work, well, there was no chance without us. So that
Mm,
helps.
that's
Uh,
deep. Yeah.
that helps process it a little bit. And then, there's a standard firefighter black humor, which I don't really use with uh, my my family members who die. But
Right.
there's kind of two races going on. One is gradually becoming a bit more desensitized to this, and the
Right.
other is that cup getting full of,
Right.
and eventually your cup's just going to be full and like, okay, fuck, that's it. I can't take this anymore. And you don't know where that tip over point is. Maybe
No,
one
it's
day,
true.
I've had friends and they're just like, that's it. I just don't ever want to see another dead body ever again. And I can't blame them, right? They've done their share. And for some people, it affects less. So it's,
I have found stoicism to help me a lot in my ability to grieve more rationally and not see death as a punishment, but just as a natural process, in in the journey. So, Marcus Aurelius wrote something along the lines of, look, after a certain point, either your brain starts to fade, but your body's cool, or vice versa, right?
mm.
Something goes first.
My mother died from ALS. So her body
Mm,
died around her brain and her
mhm,
brain was still functioning. And in
mhm.
the end, she chose to, it was before Canada had the Medical Assistance in Dying Act
Right,
made.
right,
But basically, the hospital allowed us to take her home with a whole bunch of drugs to keep her comfortable,
right, and just
knowing
kinda
knowing that she would die. And she knew that she would die, and it was a decision. So her brain was surrounded by a dying body. My father, who just passed, died of Alzheimer's, so his body hung on for years, but his brain, he was no like, he was a shadow of his former self. So then his body died around his brain. So that's so interesting that Marcus Aurelius writes about these 2 possibilities.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah, you know what I mean? And that's why, again, that's why I really, I like stoicism because it's easy and it doesn't have a lot of dogma. I you know, I've told people before, I am Muslim, but I am not some kind of Islamic scholar type historian dude. I have lectured at Harvard on Islamic history. I've lectured at Brown. I've guest lectured at a lot of different places, Lehigh, whatever. Right. But I'm not like an Islamic scholar. You understand what I'm
mhm.
saying? Like, in terms of the different,
You haven't come out of a madrasa.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I don't have it like that. My Arabic is not lit, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I believe that um a lot of what you get out of the Stoics can be taken and used easily. And that's why I liked jujitsu. Like, I learned really quickly training at House. Like, if he showed me this move today and I really focused on it, if I went outside and something popped off, I could probably pull it off. Like after about training for like 6 months, right? Where you kind of get used to how you absorb moves and things like that. Stoicism has a lot of practices that are simple to understand and you can just deploy it in your own life and give it a couple weeks, the first practice I used was called the view from above. And it's about learning how to depersonalize anything that you experience, lots of pain, lots of sadness, lots of joy, whatever. And this is a meditation that I'll often do with people where I'll say, okay, wherever you are right now, just like close your eyes, look around the room, visualize where you are and who and what's around you, and then close your eyes. Right? And then so we'll wait a couple minutes and I'll say, now take a view 10 feet up and look down on the room. See yourself in your clothes sitting there, right? See where your chair is. See the people to the left and right of you. See where I'm standing, right? Okay, cool. Now go up above the building and now you can see cars going by. You can see the street vendors. You can see people going in and out of restaurants and bars and you can see a hearse and you can see an ambulance and you can see a car full of kids getting ready to go to school, right? And then you can go up and you can see the whole region you're in, right? And observe that. Okay. And now you're seeing airplanes and you're seeing, boats, right? That are going across cargo boats and this and that, right? Then you can see graduations and people are leaving graduations, other people are leaving in funeral homes. Some people are pulling up to the hospital, other people are getting out. And you go all the way out and you can see the earth moving on its axis, right? In slow motion, right? And you can see the clouds and you can see all of the life and the little pockets of darkness, right? And then you slowly talk yourself back into your body, right? And that's how you depersonalize what happens. We always say, oh man, this happened to me, right? Oh man, it happens. It's part of the life experience that we all are guaranteed to feel, right? On the day you graduated from college, somebody failed out and was told they weren't good enough to be in the program. And you know what I mean? On the day you were born, somebody else died. On the day you die, somebody will be born, right? And so when you get that dream job, somebody else got fired, right? And so you have to understand that it's not that things are happening to you, they are happening. You will get through them, you will navigate into a new place. And sometimes if these things don't happen, you won't find your trajectory. Sometimes the worst things that come to you are the things that actually set you on the journey to being your best, highest, and happiest and most peaceful self, but it comes through the pain.
I think that's fair. And that's an incredibly useful lens to look at this through. I think you addressed most of the things that I wanted to talk about. Is there
Cool,
anything else
man.
that you'd like to leave people with?
You know what? I just like to leave people with this, man. Please take yourself in these times seriously because they're not a joke. And if anything that's not right with the ship we're on is to be righted, it will take action from those who are wise, who are courageous, who are disciplined, right? Who seek justice and who, in the course of seeking justice, do not become the demons they're trying to remove. This is crucial, right? America has been worse than this, but there's no reason for us to believe that it can't get worse than this if we don't take ourselves seriously. I am born here, San Francisco. I grew up incredibly uh, multicultural experience that was often racist, was often this, was often classist, was often a lot of things. But, I got along despite it. And I know that had I been born anywhere else in the world, this amazing life that I've lived, it just wouldn't have been lived, right? This couldn't happen anywhere else, right? And it's because of that that I love the country. It's because of that that I want the best for this country in this time. And it's going to take more than empty slogans from any party. It's going to take more than a few philosophy quotes, some quotes from the Bible, Quran, Torah, whatever, to right the ship. But like, it can be righted and you can have a hand in it. We can have a hand in it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be vengeful, but it has to happen because, jujitsu, if it doesn't teach you anything, it should teach you to speak the truth as you see it and try to have a good contribution to people around you. That's all I'm trying to do. To whatever degree I fail at it, I apologize in advance, but that's my goal, as flawed as I am.
All right. How do people get more of your thoughts and your and connect with you?
Oh, cool. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So Adisa Banjoko, you can check me out on Substack at the Bishop Chronicles podcast. It is a podcast that covers Stoicism and martial arts. For the most, I put some other different stuff behind the paywall because I used to be like a hip hop journalist. So sometimes I'm writing about Tupac or uh, RZA. Those are going to be two new pieces I'm dropping with my friendship with them and, things that I experience over there. But go to the Substack on Instagram. I'm at Bishop Chronicles with an S on the end, at Bishop Chronicles. And I have a small company that I run called 64 Blocks, where we teach meditation, chess, and jujitsu to people of all ages, but it's really kind of directed at the youth. And that's at real, the number 64, and blocks on it. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me on, man.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
you.
much. Take care.
All right. One love.